Okay, so module 3, we're going to be talking about reducing toil, which, as I mentioned before, I think it's the second most important pillar of practice for the SRE framework. In this module, the syllabus is what is toil? Why is it bad? And what can you do about it? The structure is the same as all the other modules. We'll have a video from Google again, this time a different person, talking about some of the pragmatic aspects of automation, a case story from Accenture, and a discussion about reducing toil and activity around understanding the benefits of reducing toil. So let's start with what is toil? Toil, as defined here by Vivek from Google, can be a number of things, and this definition has a lot of things. That doesn't mean toil has to be all of these things. So he says toil is the kind of work, so that's the most important thing. It's a type of work that's tied to running a production service, which tends to be manual, repetitive, automatable, tactical, devoid of enduring value, and that scales linearly as service grows. So certainly if you have work that's all of the above, that's definitely toil, but it doesn't have to be all of those things to be toil. Could be any one of them, in fact. So let's just walk through some examples of those different types of toil. Let's say manual. So it's something that you have to do manually that you'd rather not have to do, or it's taking a lot of your time. Maybe to set up a release, you have a lot of activities required to set up the configurations or the infrastructure. If you could automate that could be beneficial. That might be considered toil. Or just connecting to infrastructure to check something, check status, maybe to get some data for a report. If that's happening frequently, that definitely could be considered toil. Constant password resets, if you've got a large team, especially where you've got a lot of passwords that need to be reset, or a lot of systems with passwords that need to be reset frequently and manually, that definitely could be considered toil. There's the red bubble's interesting. This word toil, by the way, is, as far as software frameworks is concerned, is very much associated with the SRE framework. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be used with other frameworks, but for some reason, toil as a word is definitely associated with SRE, this idea of a lot of laborious, time-consuming work. Okay, another kind of toil is things that are just repetitive. Let's say you have to do a test again and again and again to validate something that you're doing. Maybe you're, again, setting up infrastructure a lot, and you're running the same old test to make sure it's working. Maybe a ping or something like that. Maybe you could automate that. Another kind of repetitive thing might be acknowledging an alert every morning. That's you got something that tends to recur, and you have to reset the alert manually. Or generally just interrupts, dealing with lots of interrupts, the things that maybe are unnecessary, that you kind of anticipate them and you'd just like to have them dispelled automatically. Automatable, so almost from an SRE point of view, almost anything that could be automated might be considered toil, and some of them are not obvious or intuitive. For example, physical meetings, you might say can't be automated, but if the meeting is only to approve something like a production deployment, maybe you could have policy as code. You could deal with that in an automated fashion, so that might be considered toil. Or maybe you have to push a button or manually reset equipment from time to time to refresh it or restart the cache or something like that. That could be considered toil if you can automate that. If you got a large number of users and you have to onboard a lot of people, creating user accounts and privileges and access to different applications may be considered toil. Tactical, so things where you have a known workaround and you have to keep applying the same workaround again and again, might be considered toil. Or things like on-call responses. If you get the same kind of call a lot, maybe you would want to automate the responses. Extracting some data. Quite often in the SRE world, you have to produce some kind of status report or update or trend analysis. You might have to go into some equipment or application to get the data. If that happens frequently, that definitely could be considered toil. Manually scaling infrastructure. So in general, anything where you have to apply more labor to cope with the growth of scale, whether it's infrastructure or other aspects, may be considered toil. There's plenty of things that are not toil as well, and even these could be argued a little bit, but let's say you have new employees being onboarded a lot and you have to set up their cell phones or their laptops or other devices or other applications. That's if those things are difficult to automate, you might say, well, those are necessary, that's necessary work, and therefore it's not really toil, it's just work that you have to do. Meetings, general meetings, HR meetings, attaboy events, planning sessions, those could be considered things that are not toil. You just need to do them. They're part of your job, and it's hard to automate some of those things. Why is toil bad? Usually toil is bad because it's occupying a lot of your time at the individual level and the organization level. That may slow you down. You may not be able to get to other tasks because any particular item of toil takes up a lot of time. That's important at the individual level. At the organization level, maybe you're not able to get to some new features, missed opportunities for the business. Quality could be affected. Manual work generally results in mistakes, especially if you get tired after doing it enough. And that can have a cost to the overall business if it occurs often enough on a scale. Career stagnation, folks don't really want to have to get bogged down in toil all the time. You don't maybe get time left for developing skills and keeping yourself personally competitive. That can also damage the reputation of the company if people in the company report the fact that it's kind of a boring company to work for because there's too much toil. So that, social media can have an impact on the organization. Attrition, if people get bogged down with toil enough and demotivated, maybe they'll leave and go somewhere else. That's not a good thing because staff turnover certainly can result in extra costs, onboarding, training, lost knowledge. Can be lots of ripple effects at the staff level and organization level. Unending. So if you just get into a situation where you just can never get ahead, right? Because there's so much toil, you can't get time to work on other things. You're constantly managing a backlog of toil items. That's really just stressful. And that can affect at the organization level. You never get time to really build a proper solution to something. You're just constantly dealing with things, manually. Maybe there's no engineering time available to fix it properly. That may result in overload and service level agreements, service level objectives being missed potentially. The final item on the list here is burnout. And I don't know if you've experienced that. I have from time to time in my own career, where you just get so darn busy and overloaded with things. You just, you get to the point where you're physically and mentally and health-wise unable to do any work almost because you're just so exhausted. At the organization level, that can not only be, troublesome for the individual health, but also for the organization. You can even have litigation or certainly negative publicity if you've got too much burnout going on in the organization. So plenty of reasons why you really want to minimize toil, certainly from a business point of view, as well as from an individual point of view. Okay, this gentleman, Damon Edwards, co-founded a company called Rundeck, which produces a product that helps record and automate playbooks for operations. That's what its primary purpose was anyways. He says something that's pretty relevant here. He says, if you aren't careful, the level of toil in an organization can increase to the point where the organization won't have the capacity to stop it. So essentially you're just so inundated with toil, you don't have time to do anything else. And he calls that engineering bankruptcy. Remember that phrase, engineering bankruptcy, because it comes up in the quiz, and it's an interesting way to describe, organizations that are just overloaded with toil. So what can you do about toil? Let's go back to the start of the course, right, where we said, what is SRE? SRE is what you can do about toil. SREs are really good at trying to address toil through automation. If you go back to the idea that, SRE is what happens when you ask a software engineer to design an operations team or The idea is to engineer a solution to avoid all this toil. That's the bottom line. Ben Traynor is, again, one of the originals of SRE practice at Google. So what can you do about toil? Engineer a solution. Engineering work is required. So you need to set aside some time to do that, which again is tough if you're overloaded with toil. So somehow you want to have, some agreement that a portion of your time is going to be working on toil reduction efforts and automation. There are three types of toil, approaches. The first one is external automation, where you apply some scripts or something to the systems that you're using. From a user's point of view, typically this might be a Selenium script or some other way of driving an API. Whatever the things are that you normally would do to operate manually, you write some automation scripts that would replicate that from the outside. That's the external automation. There's a second approach called internal automation. So perhaps once you've validated your external scripts, maybe you want to internalize those and make them part of the product itself, so the same automation tasks are built into the product. The third type is really trying to eliminate the need for whatever toil is causing in the first place by redesigning the product or the service so that it's not even a required activity. That can happen. If it's something that's happening too frequently, maybe you don't even want to have automation. You really want to have a system that doesn't require it. And that may be a way to, redesign around it. And as an SRE, you might be involved in any one of these three approaches. It's pretty normal to start with external automation. If that becomes a popular thing to do, then maybe internalize it and ultimately try to figure out how to avoid the need for it altogether. This may require working with development, of course, to do that, but that's the general idea. There's an interesting report at the bottom of the slide. The Global SRE 2022 report indicated that 66% of the folks that were included in the report are at least measuring toil in at least some of their teams, and 11% are measuring everywhere. I'd see this number is increasing over time. So definitely toil is often part of dashboards, and organizations that are doing SRE are being more and more conscious of not only the importance of toil, but what they're actually doing about it, and more actually prioritizing toil reduction.